I'm Rachel, 35 female. I live in a modest but comfortable three-bedroom house in the suburbs with my amazing daughter, Lily. By day, I'm a financial analyst, a job that requires precision, logic, and an eye for patterns, skills that, until recently, I never thought I'd have to apply to my own family. For years, I was the reliable, overlooked daughter, the one who never caused trouble and was always expected to understand. But this past Christmas, my family pushed me too far, and they discovered that the quietest people often have the most detailed ledgers. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Christmas at my parents' house had long ceased to be a source of joy. For the better part of a decade, it had become an annual obligation, a performance I endured for the sake of my daughter, Lily. Every year, I would tell myself it would be different. Every year, I would hope that my mother, Brenda, and my father, Jacob, had somehow softened, that the blatant favoritism they showed towards my younger sister, Lauren, and her family had finally waned. And every year, I was proven wrong. The tradition wasn't about family togetherness. It was a ritual of reinforcing the family hierarchy, and Lauren was firmly at the top, while I was somewhere near the bottom, just above the forgotten holiday decorations in the attic. This year, the dread felt heavier. Lily was 7, an age where the magic of Christmas is vibrant and pure, but also an age where the sting of disappointment is sharp and unforgettable. She had spent weeks carefully crafting her Christmas list, a document filled with the earnest wishes of a little girl. A particular brand of doll, a Lego set she'd seen on TV, and a sparkly art kit. She'd even made handmade cards for her grandparents, her Aunt Lauren, and her 2 cousins, decorating them with glitter and painstakingly written messages. Her heart was so full of love and giving, and all I wanted was for her to receive even a fraction of that back. The drive to my parents' house was tense. Lily was buzzing with excitement in the back seat, clutching a beautifully wrapped gift she'd picked out for her cousin Ava. "Do you think Grandma will like the cookies we baked?" she asked, her voice a hopeful melody. I forced a smile. "Of course, sweetie, they're delicious." But I knew the cookies would be placed on a side table and forgotten, while Lauren's store-bought, elegantly packaged pastries would be lauded as a thoughtful, sophisticated contribution. It was always this way. Lauren's efforts were celebrated, mine were tolerated. When we arrived, the scene was exactly as I'd pictured. My father, Jacob, was fawning over Lauren's husband, Mark, complimenting his new luxury SUV parked ostentatiously in the driveway. My mother was in the kitchen, cooing over Lauren's children, Ava and Noah, who were already tearing into a pre-Christmas appetizer of expensive chocolates. "Oh, look at you two, just precious," Brenda chirped, ignoring Lily who stood timidly in the doorway. I cleared my throat. "Hi, Mom, Merry Christmas." She turned, her smile tightening almost imperceptibly. "Oh, Rachel, you're here. Put your coats in the closet. And Lily, don't track snow on the floor." There was no hug, no warm welcome, just a directive. Lily, ever the sweet soul, walked over and handed her grandmother the tin of homemade cookies. "We made these for you, Grandma." Brenda took the tin without looking at it and set it on the counter. "That's nice, dear. Now go play with your cousins." She immediately turned back to Lauren, resuming their conversation about a recent spa day they'd shared. The dismissal was so casual, so complete, that it felt like a physical slap. I saw the light in Lily's eyes dim for a moment, but she obediently went to find her cousins, who were busy comparing new tablets they had apparently received as early gifts. The afternoon crawled by in a series of similar microaggressions. My father asked me about my job with a tone of bored condescension. "Still crunching numbers, are you? Must be thrilling." This was a stark contrast to the way he praised Mark's vague but important-sounding job in acquisitions. My contributions to the family dinner, a complex scalloped potato dish that took me hours, were met with silence, while Lauren's simple green bean casserole was declared divine. I tried to keep my composure, focusing on Lily. I watched her attempt to join her cousins' games, only to be shunted to the side. They were absorbed in their new gadgets, their world a closed loop of shared privilege that Lily, with her humble offerings and hopeful heart, couldn't seem to penetrate. Lauren did nothing to encourage them to include her, instead watching on with a smug little smile, as if enjoying the confirmation of her children's elevated S. Status. The main event, of course, was opening the presents. This was the moment the hierarchy was put on full display, a carefully orchestrated pageant of affection measured in dollars. My parents' gift pile was a mountain of glossy wrapping paper and elaborate bows. On one side, a towering stack for Lauren, Mark, Ava, and Noah. On the other, a small, sad-looking little pile for Lily and me. I knew what to expect for myself: a generic scented candle or a gift card to a department store, a gift that screamed, "I fulfilled my obligation." But I held out a sliver of hope for Lily. She was a child, after all. Surely they wouldn't be so cruel to their own granddaughter. As the gift opening began, the disparity was nauseating. Ava and Noah received everything a child could dream of: video game consoles, designer clothes, a drone, and an enormous, state-of-the-art dollhouse that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Each gift was met with oohs and ahs from my parents. "Oh, Jacob, look at that. Isn't it just perfect for our little princess?" my mother would exclaim. Lauren would thank them with an air of regal acceptance, as if she were receiving her rightful tribute. Finally, it was Lily's turn. My father reached behind the tree and pulled out a small, clumsily wrapped box. It looked like an afterthought, something grabbed from a bargain bin at the last minute. He handed it to Lily, who took it with trembling, hopeful hands. Her eyes were wide, her little face a mask of anticipation. She still believed. She still had faith in the magic of Christmas and the love of her family. And as she tore off the paper, I felt my heart break into a million pieces, because I knew that faith was about to be shattered. The wrapping paper came away to reveal a flimsy cardboard box, the kind used for cheap, off-brand toys. On the front was a faded picture of a generic-looking doll with vacant plastic eyes and stiff, synthetic hair. The box itself was dented in one corner, and a price tag from a dollar store was still partially visible, a large, aggressive $4.99 peeking out from under a sloppy piece of tape. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. This was the sum total of their affection for their 7-year-old granddaughter. Lily, bless her innocent heart, tried to make the best of it. "Oh, a dolly," she said, her voice small. She slid the plastic tray out of the box. The doll's dress was made of a crinkly, paper-like fabric, and one of its legs was bent at an unnatural angle. As Lily lifted it, the leg came off completely, clattering onto the floor. The room fell silent for a beat. The broken plastic limb lay on the plush carpet, a pathetic symbol of the entire day. Then the snickering started. It was quiet at first, a few stifled giggles from Ava and Noah. Lauren shot them a look that wasn't one of reprimand, but of shared amusement. My father, Jacob, cleared his throat, a smirk playing on his lips. "Well, looks like that one's a bit of a fixer-upper," he chuckled, as if it were the funniest joke in the world. Lily's face crumpled. Her lower lip began to tremble, and her eyes, which had been so full of Christmas sparkle just moments before, filled with tears. She looked from the broken doll in her hands to the mountain of expensive toys piled around her cousins. She looked at her grandparents, her aunt, her cousins, and saw nothing but mockery in their eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek, followed by another. She let out a soft, choked sob. That's when my mother delivered the final, devastating blow. She knelt not to comfort Lily, but to address her with a tone of cold, dismissive explanation. "Now, Lily, don't cry," Brenda said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "You have to understand. We have to be fair with our money. You're not the favorite grandchild. The real gifts are for your cousins." She patted Lily's head, a gesture that was more of a dismissal than in comfort. "You'll understand when you're older." The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. You're not the favorite. It wasn't just implied anymore. It was a stated fact, a declaration of her worthlessness in this family. My sister Lauren even chimed in, a saccharine smile on her face. "That's right, sweetie. Grandma and Grandpa have to spoil Ava and Noah. Their daddy works so hard." The room erupted in quiet laughter. Not loud, boisterous laughter, but the cruel, knowing snickers of people who were enjoying a moment of superiority. My own sister, my own parents, and their golden grandchildren, all laughing at the sight of my 7-year-old daughter crying over a broken toy she'd been explicitly told was a second-rate gift for a second-rate grandchild. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break, but a cold, quiet shift. The years of swallowing my pride, of making excuses for their behavior, of telling myself to be the bigger person, it all evaporated in that moment. I looked at my daughter's heartbroken face, and the only thing I felt was a pure, unadulterated rage. A protective fire ignited in my chest, burning away all the conditioned deference and familial obligation. I stood up, my movements calm and deliberate. I walked over to Lily, scooped her into my arms, and held her tight. "It's okay, baby," I whispered into her hair, my voice shaking with fury. "We're leaving." I didn't look at any of them. I didn't have to. I could feel their smug, judgmental eyes on my back. I carried Lily to the front hall, grabbing our coats. My father followed me, his tone one of annoyance rather than concern. "Rachel, don't be so dramatic, it was just a little joke. You're making a scene." "A scene?" I turned to face him, my voice low and dangerously steady. "You just told my 7-year-old daughter to her face that she is less loved than her cousins. You gave her a broken piece of trash and laughed when she cried. That's not a joke. That's cruelty." My mother and sister had followed him into the hall. Brenda had her arms crossed, her face a mask of indignation. "Well, it's the truth. We can't afford to spend hundreds of dollars on everyone. Lauren's family is our priority." "Your priority," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Got it," loud and clear. I bundled a still sobbing Lily into her coat, picked up my purse, and walked to the door. I didn't take the sad little candle they'd gotten me. I didn't take the leftover potatoes. I left everything there. As I opened the door, Lauren called out, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Oh, Rachel, don't be like this. You're ruining Christmas." I paused in the doorway and turned back to look at the three of them, my mother, my father, my sister. Their faces were a portrait of smug self-righteousness. They truly believed they had done nothing wrong. They saw my pain, my daughter's pain, as an inconvenience, a disruption to their perfect, curated holiday. "Don't worry, Lauren," I said, my voice as cold as the winter air. "I won't ruin another one of your Christmases ever again." And with that, I walked out the door, closing it softly but firmly behind me. The click of the latch was the sound of a final, irreversible severing. 20 minutes later, as I was comforting Lily in our own quiet, safe living room, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. It didn't say, "Are you okay?" or "I'm sorry." It said, "You forgot to help with the dishes." The house went quiet for them because their maid service for the evening had just walked out. But for me, the quiet was a promise. A promise that things were about to change, and they were going to learn, in excruciating detail, the true cost of their priorities. The drive home was a blur of silent fury and soothing whispers to Lily. I wiped her tears, promising her a special Mommy and Lily Christmas with hot chocolate, her favorite movie, and the real presents I had waiting for her under our own tree. By the time we were curled up on the couch, the broken doll and the cruel words of her family had started to fade for her, replaced by the warmth and safety of home. But for me, the fire was just beginning to build. My mother's text about the dishes was the final confirmation I needed. There was no remorse, no self-awareness, nothing but a sense of entitlement so profound it was almost comical. I stared at the message, a single, selfish sentence, and felt a strange sense of clarity. The relationship I had been trying to salvage for years wasn't just damaged, it was a fiction. I had been playing a role in a family that didn't exist. As Lily slept soundly in her bed, I sat at my kitchen table, the silence of the house amplifying the storm in my mind. The phrase my mother had used kept replaying itself. "We can't afford to spend hundreds of dollars on everyone." It was the same excuse they had used for years. It was the reason they couldn't help me with a down payment on my house, while they co-signed a loan for Lauren's. It was the reason they'd never visited me unless I paid for their travel, yet they'd fly across the country for a weekend with Lauren's family. It was their go-to justification for every disparity, every act of favoritism. They were retired, they were on a fixed income, they had to be careful. But I was a financial analyst. My entire career was built on seeing through flimsy excuses and finding the truth in numbers, and something about their story had never quite added up. My father had been a successful regional sales manager for a large corporation. He talked endlessly about his stock options, his pension, his 401(k). My mother had worked part-time, but had inherited a modest sum from her own parents. They lived in the same paid-off house they'd owned for 40 years. Their expenses should have been minimal, yet they pleaded poverty whenever it was convenient. A memory surfaced, something my father had said a few months ago. I'd called to ask for advice on a minor home repair, and he'd cut me off, Sue. Ending flustered. "Can't talk now, Rachel. We're dealing with a bit of a financial emergency." He'd been vague, muttering something about unexpected taxes and investment issues before quickly hanging up. At the time, I'd felt a pang of guilt for bothering him. Now, I wondered. Driven by a sudden, fierce curiosity, I opened my laptop. I wasn't planning on doing anything illegal, but my mind was racing, connecting dots I hadn't seen before. I started with public records, something anyone could access. Property records for their address. It was all standard, owned outright, no liens, no surprises there. Then I remembered something else. Years ago, when I was first starting my career, my dad had asked for my help setting up his online banking and investment portals. He was terrible with technology and had given me all his login information to get him started. He was the type of person who would use the same simple password for everything and never change it. On a whim, I tried it. The password was Brenda Lauren 1. My name, of course, was nowhere to be found. I held my breath as the page loaded. I expected it to fail. I almost hoped it would. But then the screen refreshed, and I was looking at the main dashboard of their joint checking account, and my blood ran cold. The balance wasn't that of a couple on a struggling fixed income. It was substantial. There was a healthy six-figure number sitting in their primary checking and savings accounts. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the transaction history. As I scrolled back through the months, a clear and sickening pattern emerged. Every month, like clockwork, there were massive transfers out of their savings account. Payments of thousands of dollars. I clicked on the details of one. The recipient was a luxury car dealership. A payment for a brand new SUV. The same one Mark had been bragging about in the driveway. Then another. A payment directly to a high-end credit card. I knew for a fact it wasn't my parents' card. They only used a simple cashback card from their local bank. This one was a premium travel rewards card, the kind Lauren always used. I kept digging, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Mortgage payments to a different bank than my parents, in a different city. The city where Lauren lived. Payments for landscaping services, for a private school tuition, for country club dues. It was all there, a meticulous record of my parents' secret financial life. They weren't just supplementing Lauren's lifestyle, they were funding it entirely. Her perfect life as a stay-at-home mom with a successful husband was a complete fabrication, underwritten by my parents' retirement funds. The financial emergency my dad had mentioned. The date corresponded with a massive, one-time transfer of $50,000 to a contractor specializing in custom kitchen renovations. I remembered Lauren posting photos of her new gourmet kitchen on social media just a week later, with the caption, "So blessed that my hubby works so hard to give us our dream home." The lie was so audacious, so blatant, it left me breathless. For years, they had been systematically draining their savings to prop up my sister's facade of wealth and success, while simultaneously feeding me a narrative of scarcity and financial hardship. Every time I had asked for a little help or support, they had cried poor. Every time they had given me a cheap, thoughtless gift, they had used the excuse of being on a budget. All the while, they were hemorrhaging money to maintain the golden child status of my sister. The broken doll wasn't an act of careless thoughtlessness. It was a calculated insult, a deliberate underscoring of my and my daughter's place in the family. They could have afforded to buy Lily the entire toy store. They chose to give her a $5 piece of broken plastic to reinforce the narrative that they simply didn't have the resources. It was a lie designed to manage my expectations and keep me from questioning the gross disparity. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the screen illuminating the rage on my face. The hurt was still there, a deep, aching wound, but it was now overshadowed by a cold, sharp-edged fury. They hadn't just lied to me. They had used their lies to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty, to keep me in my place. They had stolen from my daughter's sense of worth to fuel my sister's ego. They thought I was just the boring, number-crunching daughter. They had no idea that the skills I used every day to analyze balance sheets and find financial discrepancies were about to be turned on them. The game was over. It was time for an audit. The next few days were a blur of controlled fury and meticulous research. Lily was blissfully unaware, enjoying her extended Christmas break from school. We baked more cookies, built a massive Lego castle that took over the entire living room floor, and watched every holiday movie imaginable. Her laughter was the fuel that kept my anger from boiling over into recklessness. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about justice for her. It was about ensuring that no one would ever again make her feel like she was second best. My evenings, however, were dedicated to a deep dive into my family's finances. It felt like the most important project of my career. The initial discovery in their checking account was just the tip of the iceberg. Using the same password, Brenda Lauren 1, I methodically accessed every account I could find linked to their names. Their main brokerage account, my father's 401k portal, and even my mother's small inheritance portfolio. Each new login was a fresh wave of nausea and validation. The picture that emerged was one of staggering financial recklessness, all in service of propping up Lauren. My father, who had always lectured me about the importance of fiscal responsibility and saving for retirement, had been systematically liquidating his stock options and making early, penalty-laden withdrawals from his retirement accounts. The sums were eye-watering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had been pulled out over the last 5 years alone. I cross-referenced the withdrawal dates with Lauren's social media posts. A $75,000 withdrawal in March 2022 corresponded perfectly with her surprise family trip to Hawaii. A $40,000 withdrawal in June 2023 matched the down payment she claimed she and Mark had saved up for so long for their boat. It was a conspiracy of deceit. Lauren and Mark were not just passive recipients, they were active participants. I found email chains between my father and Lauren, which he had carelessly saved in a folder on his desktop that was linked to a cloud service. In these emails, Lauren wasn't asking for help, she was demanding it. She would send him invoices for her children's private school, links to designer furniture she wanted, and detailed budgets for home renovations, with notes like, "Dad, we need this covered by the 15th. There was no gratitude, only expectation. My father's replies were even more damning. He would write back, "Don't worry, princess, I'll move some things around. Your mother and I are happy to do it. Just don't mention this to your sister. She wouldn't understand." She wouldn't understand. The sentence echoed in my head. They weren't protecting me from the truth. They were protecting their lies from my scrutiny. They knew that I, the financial analyst, would see their behavior not as generosity, but as what it was. A fiscally irresponsible and emotionally bankrupt scheme to buy my sister's affection and maintain a false image of success. The most painful discovery came when I looked into my mother's inheritance. It had come from my grandmother, a woman I had adored. She had always treated Lauren and me equally. When she passed, she had left my mother a portfolio of blue-chip stocks, worth about $200,000 at the time. I remembered my mother telling me, "This is for the family's future, for my grandchildren." I had always assumed that meant all her grandchildren. I was wrong. The portfolio was nearly empty. It had been sold off, piece by piece, to fund Lauren's life. The money that my loving grandmother had intended for the future of her family had been used to pay for my sister's country club membership and designer handbags. I felt a profound sense of violation, not just for myself, but for my grandmother. Her legacy had been squandered to indulge the whims of a spoiled brat and her enabling parents. I started compiling the evidence into a single, comprehensive spreadsheet. I was meticulous. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every damning email was documented. I created columns for the date, the amount, the source account, the destination, and a purpose column that I filled in with links to Lauren's corresponding social media posts. The final document was a masterpiece of financial forensics. It told a story of over $1 million, a conservative estimate, siphoned from my parents' retirement and funneled directly into Lauren's pocket over the course of a decade. And what had I received during that time? When I needed help with a down payment for my modest starter home after my divorce, my father had sat me down and given me a stern lecture on living within my means. "We can't just bail you out, Rachel. It wouldn't be responsible." They gave me $1,000, a loan which they made me pay back with interest, and told me they were proud of me for learning to stand on my own 2 feet. Reading that now, knowing they had given Lauren a 6-figure sum for her down payment just 6 months earlier, made me physically ill. The investigation hardened my resolve. My initial plan had been simple: confront them and cut them out of my life. But now, that felt insufficient. A quiet exit would allow them to control the narrative. They would paint me as the ungrateful, dramatic daughter who flew off the handle over a silly Christmas gift. They would continue their charade, and my sister would continue to bleed them dry. No, they didn't deserve a quiet exit. They deserved a public reckoning. They deserved an audit. And I was just the person to deliver it. I had all the data. I had the proof. Now all I needed was a plan, a way to present this information so devastatingly and so publicly that there would be no escape, no excuses, and no recovery. They had built their family on a foundation of lies and financial deception. I was going to tear it all down, brick by brick, using the one thing they could no longer hide from: the truth. The quiet, number-crunching daughter was about to balance the books, and it was going to be a bloodbath. My plan began to take shape not as a burst of inspiration, but as a cold, calculated strategy. It was the same process I used at work when preparing for a major presentation to the board of directors. Gather the data, structure the narrative, anticipate the counterarguments, and choose the perfect venue for delivery. In this case, the venue would be next year's Christmas dinner. It was a year away, which gave me the time I needed to let the pressure build and to ensure my own emotions were under control. A revenge served hot is messy. A revenge served cold is devastatingly precise. The first step was to go completely silent. I blocked my parents' and sister's numbers. I didn't respond to the handful of angry texts that came through before the block, accusing me of being childish and oversensitive. I let them stew in their own self-righteousness. This silence was a critical part of the strategy. It would make them uneasy. My predictable presence at every family function had been something they took for granted. My absence would create a vacuum, and in that vacuum, their story about me being difficult would take root among the extended family. This was perfect. The more they maligned me behind my back, the more spectacular their downfall would be. Over the next 11 months, I lived my life. I focused on my career, earning a promotion and a significant raise. I poured all the love and attention I had previously asked it on my toxic family and to my daughter, Lily. We took weekend trips, we started new hobbies, and I watched her blossom, free from the oppressive judgment of her grandparents and aunt. She never once asked about them. Her only memory of that Christmas was the fun she'd had with me after we left. I had successfully protected her, and that was the most important victory of all. Meanwhile, I continued to monitor my parents' finances from a distance. As predicted, the spending on Lauren didn't slow down, it accelerated. With me out of the picture, there was no longer even the thinnest pretense of needing to save or be fair. They paid for a lavish European vacation for Lauren's family and bought her a new car for her birthday. They were liquidating their assets at an alarming rate. They were flying toward a cliff, and they couldn't even see it. My plan had 2 phases. Phase 1 was financial. Phase 2 was the emotional detonation. For Phase 1, I began preparing a formal financial portfolio. I didn't just use my messy spreadsheet. I created a professional, bound presentation, complete with graphs, charts, and highlighted transactions. It looked like an official audit report because that's exactly what it was. I titled it, The Brenda and Jacob Family Trust, a 10-year financial review and asset allocation analysis. On the cover page, I listed the primary beneficiary, Lauren Miller and family, and the secondary beneficiary, Rachel, my last name, and family. Inside, I detailed everything. I included pie charts showing that over 95% of their discretionary spending and asset withdrawals had gone to Lauren. I created a timeline that matched major life events: my divorce versus Lauren's wedding, my struggle for a down payment versus hers, my daughter's modest birthday parties versus the extravagant ones they threw for her cousins. I included copies of the emails, the social media posts, and bank statements. It was a cold, hard, undeniable mountain of evidence. I made 5 copies, one for each of them, one for me, and one for a special guest I intended to invite. Phase 2 was the delivery. About a month before Christmas, I unblocked my mother's number and sent her a single, simple text message. Lily and I would like to come for Christmas this year. We miss you. The response was almost instantaneous. My mother, likely believing I had come to my senses and was ready to apologize, was magnanimous in her victory. Of course, dear, we've missed you too. We were so worried. We'll be thrilled to have you. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened. In her mind, I had thrown a tantrum, and now I was ready to fall back in line. This was exactly what I wanted. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, I played the part of the penitent daughter. I called them, asked about their health, and listened patiently to their endless stories about Lauren's perfect life. They were smug, believing they had won. Lauren even sent me a condescending text. "So glad you decided to stop being so dramatic. The holidays are about family, after all." I replied with a simple, smiley face emoji. My final move was to orchestrate the guest list. I knew my parents always invited my father's older brother, my Uncle David, to Christmas dinner. David was the patriarch of the extended family, a stern, no-nonsense man who had built his own business from the ground up. He valued honesty and hard work above all else. He was also my parents' financial advisor, or, at least, he thought he was. He had helped them set up their retirement accounts years ago and believed they were following his conservative investment advice. He had no idea they had been secretly draining the accounts he managed for them. A week before Christmas, I called him. "Uncle David," I said, my voice carefully controlled. "I have a delicate financial matter I need to discuss with you regarding Mom and Dad. I've discovered some significant discrepancies in their accounts that suggest they may be victims of fraud. Could you please make sure to be at Christmas dinner? I'm going to present my findings then." The bait was perfect. The word fraud would get his attention and ensure his presence. He agreed immediately, his voice tight with concern. He thought he was coming to help his brother. He had no idea he was coming to be a witness. The stage was set. I had the reports, bound and ready in my briefcase. I had the audience. And I had a year's worth of repressed rage, honed to a razor's edge. This Christmas, there would be gifts. But mine wouldn't come wrapped in pretty paper and bows. They would come in a manila envelope, and they would be devastating. We walked into my parents' house on Christmas Day, and it was like stepping back in time. The same cloying scent of pine and cinnamon, the same smug expressions on my sisters' and parents' faces. They greeted me with an air of triumphant forgiveness, as if I were the one who needed to be pardoned. Lauren gave me a brittle hug and whispered, "I'm glad you saw the light." I just smiled. Lily was a bit older and wiser this year. Before we came, I had a talk with her. I told her that some people in our family weren't very good at being kind, and that no matter what happened, she was loved and cherished. I gave her her main gift from me in the morning, a top-of-the-line tablet and a huge Lego set she'd been dreaming of. I told her any gifts from her grandparents were just a bonus, and not to worry about them. She came armed with a 7-year-old skepticism, a far cry from the wide-eyed hope of the previous year. The gift opening ceremony was a repeat performance. lavish gifts for Lauren's family, and a modest but slightly better gift for Lily, a board game that was at least age-appropriate and intact. For me, the obligatory scented candle. They were making a token effort, a clear sign they believed the matter was settled. I accepted it with a gracious nod, placing it beside my briefcase. After the gifts, my Uncle David arrived. He looked serious, giving me a concerned glance as he took off his coat. "Rachel," he said in a low voice, "what's this about fraud?" "All in good time, Uncle David," I replied calmly. "Let's just enjoy the appetizer first." We all sat down for dinner. The conversation was stilted. My parents and Lauren directed most of their conversation to David, bragging about Mark's latest success and the children's achievements. I remained mostly silent, eating my food, a coiled spring of anticipation in my gut. Finally, when the dessert plates were cleared, I decided it was time. I stood up, briefcase in hand. "If I could have everyone's attention for a moment," I said, my voice clear and steady. The table fell silent. They all looked at me, expecting a heartfelt apology or a tearful Christmas toast. They were about to be sorely disappointed. "Last year," I began, "a very painful incident occurred in this house. An incident that was dismissed as a joke. I was told my feelings, and more importantly, my daughter's feelings, were an overreaction. I was told that the reason for the disparity in this family was due to financial hardship." My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Rachel, this is not the time or the place." "Oh, I think this is the perfect time and place," I countered, my voice hardening. "Because I've spent the last year looking into those so-called hardships. As a financial analyst, I was concerned. And what I found was, as I told you, Uncle David, a case of fraud, but not the kind you think." I opened my briefcase and took out the 5 bound reports. I walked around the table and placed one in front of my mother, my father, my sister and her husband, and my Uncle David. I kept one for myself. "I've prepared a financial review," I announced. "A 10-year summary of my parents' assets. I call it an itemized list of betrayal. Please open to the first page." There was a stunned silence, followed by the rustle of paper. I watched their faces as they read the title page. My father's face went pale. My mother's jaw dropped. Lauren looked utterly confused, then her eyes darted to our parents with a flicker of panic. Uncle David, however, looked intrigued. He opened the report and began to read with professional focus. "As you can see from the executive summary on page 2, I continued, my voice taking on the tone of a boardroom presentation, over the past decade, approximately $1.2 million has been withdrawn from retirement and investment accounts. Let's turn to page 4, the asset allocation chart." I gestured to the report. "This pie chart shows where that money went. As you can see, 96% of the funds were directed to one beneficiary, the family of Lauren and Mark Miller." Lauren let out a choked gasp. "That's a lie." "Is it?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "Please turn to Appendix A. There you will find copies of bank transfers, payments for your mortgage, your car loans, your country club dues, your children's private school tuition, all paid directly from Mom and Dad's accounts." My mother slammed her report on the table. "How dare you? How did you get this?" "You gave me the password years ago, Mom. Brenda Lauren 1, you never thought I'd use it. You never thought the quiet one was paying attention." I turned to my Uncle David, who was staring at the report, his face a thundercloud. "Uncle David, if you'll look at Appendix B, you'll see the systematic liquidation of the very stocks you advised them to hold for their old age. All sold off to fund, for example, a $50,000 kitchen renovation that Lauren claimed her husband paid for." I glanced at Mark, whose face had turned a blotchy red. My father finally found his voice. "This is a private family matter. You have no right." "It stopped being a private matter when you started lying to my face about it." I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. "It stopped being a private matter when you used those lies to justify hurting my child. You told me you couldn't help me with a measly $10,000 for a down payment because you were on a fixed income, when you had just given my sister $100,000 for hers? You lectured me on fiscal responsibility, while you were setting your own retirement on fire to buy her a life she didn't earn. Tears were streaming down my mother's face. We did it because she needed us. You've always been so independent. Independent? I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. I was independent because you forced me to be. You call this helping her? You've turned her into a helpless dependent. You've been committing financial fraud against yourselves and emotional fraud against me for years. I looked at Lauren. Her face was a mask of fury and humiliation. And you, I said, you went along with it. You posted your perfect life all over social media, taking credit for things you never earned. You let your parents sacrifice their future so you could play dress up as a wealthy housewife. And you smirked while my daughter cried over a broken toy, knowing full well it was all a lie. The room was deathly quiet. The only sound was my mother's sobbing. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment before delivering the final blow. Uncle David, I said, turning to him. As their financial advisor, I assume this information is new to you. I have also taken the liberty of calculating their new financial reality. Based on their current rate of spending and their depleted assets, I project they will be completely insolvent in approximately 18 months. David closed the report, his face grim. He looked at his brother, my father, with profound disappointment. Jacob, is this true? My father just stared at his plate, unable to speak. I picked up my briefcase. My work here is done, I said. Lily, let's go. I took my daughter's hand and we walked towards the door. No one tried to stop me. As I left, I heard Uncle David's voice, low and furious, begin to speak to my father. The quietest Christmas dinner had just begun. For me, it was over. Leaving that house felt like taking the first breath of clean air after being trapped in a smoke-filled room for years. I didn't feel triumphant or giddy with revenge. I felt a profound, cleansing sense of relief. The weight of their lies, their expectations, and their conditional love was finally gone. I had not just severed a tie. I had amputated a toxic limb that had been slowly poisoning me my entire life. The fallout was immediate and spectacular, though I only heard about it secondhand. Uncle David, true to his character, was appalled. He apparently stayed for hours, dissecting the financial report with my parents. He was furious not only at their recklessness, but at the deception. He had spent years giving them sound advice, believing he was helping secure his brother's future, only to find out they had been lying to him the entire time. According to a cousin who later called me, his parting words to my father were, "You made your bed, Jacob. Don't you dare come to me when the money runs out." My sister Lauren and her husband Mark reportedly stormed out shortly after I did, screaming at my parents for being stupid enough to get caught. Their concern wasn't for their parents' well-being, but for the sudden and abrupt termination of their primary income stream. The golden goose had been slain, and they were furious about it. The social media posts about their fabulous life stopped abruptly. Within a few months, I heard through the family grapevine that their country club membership was canceled, and their children were being moved from their expensive private school to the local public school. The facade had crumbled. My parents tried to contact me, of course. First came the angry, accusatory voicemails. I was ungrateful, cruel, a monster for humiliating them in front of family. When that didn't work, the tone shifted to desperate, wheedling pleas. They were sorry, they made a mistake, they loved me, and couldn't we please just talk about it? But their apologies were hollow, laced with self-pity and blame. They were sorry they got caught, not sorry for what they did. I never responded. I changed my phone number and my email address. I was done. The first few months were strange. It was like phantom limb syndrome. I would instinctively reach for the phone on a Sunday afternoon to call them or feel a pang of guilt on their birthdays. But then I would look at Lily, happy and thriving, and the feeling would pass. I was mourning the family I wished I had, not the one I actually did. About a year and a half later, right on schedule with my financial projection, the inevitable happened. I received a letter at my house, forwarded from my old address. It was from my mother. It was a long, rambling, handwritten letter, filled with tear stains and recriminations. The gist of it was that they were out of money. The house had been reverse mortgaged to its limit, their credit cards were maxed out, and they didn't know how they were going to live. Lauren, they wrote, refused to help them. She and Mark were apparently having their own financial troubles and had told my parents they were on their own. The letter ended with a desperate plea. "As your mother, I am begging you for help. You are our only hope." I read the letter twice. The Rachel of 2 years ago would have been consumed with guilt. She would have felt obligated, responsible. She would have swept in to save them, once again putting their needs before her own. But that Rachel was gone. I thought about my own daughter, Lily. My job as a parent was to protect her, to provide for her future, and to teach her what healthy, unconditional love looked like. Bailing out the people who had deliberately and maliciously hurt her would be the worst lesson I could ever teach. It would teach her that cruelty has no consequences, that love means being a doormat. I took the letter and my financial report out of my files. I put them both into a large envelope. I didn't write a response. Instead, I printed out a list of local bankruptcy attorneys and a brochure for a government-subsidized senior housing facility. I placed these in the envelope as well. It wasn't a cruel gesture, but a practical one. It was the advice of a financial analyst, not a daughter. It was the only help I was willing to give. I mailed the package to them and never heard from them again. I learned from my cousin that they eventually had to sell the house and move into a small apartment. My father, at nearly 70, had to take a job as a greeter at a hardware store. Lauren and Mark downsized and were reportedly struggling. The family hierarchy they had invested everything in had collapsed into a pile of debt and resentment. Today, my life is peaceful. It's smaller in a way, but so much richer. My family consists of me, Lily, and a close-knit group of friends who have shown us what true loyalty and unconditional support look like. We have our own traditions, our own holidays. Christmas is a joyous, peaceful affair filled with laughter and love, with no hidden agendas or painful comparisons. Lily is a happy, confident, and kind young girl who knows she is, and always will be, the favorite. I cut off the dead weight, and in doing so, I finally allowed myself and my daughter to grow.